Welcome to the Carl Jackson Show, your daily dose of freedom. Please join me on all things social media at the Carl Jackson Show, wherever you go to get your podcast, the Carl Jackson Show. All right, the left is going back crazy. Several things have happened since we were on air last, and it's an honor to be back with you today on this Thursday, February 29th. This is a leap year. This is the last day of Black History Month, so Gabe, this is the last day that Gabe will have to pay me to work for me. This is a little frustrating. I've enjoyed collecting the paychecks from Gabe. I really do appreciate that. So anyway, that will be the last day for that. But the left is going nuts, and guys, so we've been going nuts too. Okay, here's what I want to talk about today. The 2024 election will be like none we've ever seen, and Carl, well, we went through 2020. That was a rigged election. Some will say it was stolen. And trust me, I get it. Completely crazy election cycle with the COVID lockdowns. You had Trump citing the CARES Act. The left used the CARES Act against them. You had Fauci and Deborah Birx literally using their powers, if you will, against them. He emboldened them, not knowing, I guess, that the deep state was after him, despite the fact that they had come after him with the Russia collusion hoax and the whole Ukraine narrative. But it's going to get even worse for Donald Trump. And I don't say that lightly. And I am hoping and praying that he wins. And I'm going to show up to vote. And I know that you guys will too. But guys, it's going to take us voting in mass numbers. He's going to need mass numbers. And I'm going to tell you why. Because this year's election isn't necessarily going to be about votes or voters. It's going to be about lawfare, and that's what we're seeing put into play right now. This gentleman, and I forget his name, but he always goes crazy. You can see his Afro puff shaking. He goes so crazy. Anyway, he was on. Where is he from? What is this guy's name? I see him frequently, or I see him on clips frequently, but he's on MSNBC, and I forget his name. Forgive me. I'm not trying to be. Oh, Ellie Mistel is his name. But here's what he has to say, because what we found out yesterday is that the Supreme Court will hear Trump's presidential immunity claim. And I want to break this down real quick before I move on to an election in 2024 that will neither be free nor fair. There was a great column that I found in American Mind, and this guy nailed it. And I want to talk about that, and I want to brace you for it. You've already been seeing it. There's many people that are saying, and I've said it, Joe Biden isn't going to campaign. He is campaigning. He is campaigning. I'm going to explain to you how Joe Biden is campaigning harder than you could imagine. And you see it. And as soon as I say it, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, you're right. You're right. Anyway. All right. So here is this guy, Ellie Mistel is his name. But let's go ahead and listen to this clip. This is Ellie Mistel of MSNBC, frustrated that the Supreme Court of the United States will hear Trump's presidential immunity claim. Unbelievable.
The reason why people like Mark and people like Dahlia seem to have a crystal ball is because they're real, because they're realists, and they understand the court for what it is. And at some point, people in the media, people at home, and people sitting in the White House have to stop pretending that the Supreme Court is some kind of benign, trying to do its best institution, and start to realize that there are 6 Republicans, not conservatives, Republicans on the Supreme Court who view it as their job to help the Republican Party. And until we do something about that, until we take away that power, until we draw the line on them there, they will continue to do this. They will help Trump. They will take away abortion rights. They will end affirmative action. They will liberalize gun rights. They will do all of it until we stop them. And
this guy said abortion rights. There are no abortion rights outlined in the Constitution. Gun rights, the Second Amendment. We have the Second Amendment. This is a guy that I guess apparently hasn't read the Constitution of the United States of America. And the 6 justices that are on the bench sometimes frustrate me as well. Justice Clarence Thomas being the most consistent of them all. But frankly, they are what's called originalists, meaning they read, and we just saw Ketanji Brown Jackson become a contextualist recently. I'm not sure where this guy is coming from, except I take that back. I do know where he's coming from. What the left wants to do is to stack the court. And so these are the type of arguments they're going to make. And these are the type of arguments that you're going to continue to hear from the left, because they cannot win elections based upon their ideas. You get Republicans that are running scared on talking about the issue of life, but the Democrats are not scared because they know that Republicans are scared of them. Democrats say what they mean, and they mean what they say. And they keep on with narratives like this until they get what they want. Eventually, if we don't shut this down, this nonsense, this narrative that there should be more than 9 Supreme Court justices and so on, et cetera, that is just Republicans. So can we surmise the same thing from the Ketanji Brown Jacksons, from the Elena Kagans, from the Sonia Sotomayors, that they're Democrats on the bench? No, those are, in my opinion, they're lefties that are on the bench. And then you have people that actually believe in the Constitution that are on the bench and try to interpret the Constitution and by its original intent. And I think that's what you see with the other 6 justices, although, let's be honest, John Roberts sometimes does get political, and that's because he doesn't want to be hated by people like that guy that you just saw from MSNBC, who must have been hangry, by the way. I mean, that guy, feed that guy as quickly as possible, because he didn't seem like he was having a good time. But anyway, that's who the left is. They want to destroy this country. They want to tear everything down that is worth preserving. They want to tear down the rule of law. No mention of the fact that what's happening to the former president of the United States of America is absolutely unprecedented in American history. It has never happened before, and it should not be happening again. He's talking about whether the Supreme Court should hear the case as to whether or not Trump is immune or should receive presidential immunity for crimes that were not committed while he was president. He's talking about the J6 riot where Trump was out there and gave a rally and said, go and peacefully protest. Are you kidding me? And then what other crimes took place? They're still trying to rehash this Russia collusion hoax. They're trying to rehash this Ukraine Trump and his call to Ukraine, his call to Zelensky, and all this kind. They're trying to rehash all of this stuff that has been proven false, even within courts. You had a Robert Mueller report hired by Democrats that came out that was very extensive, that proved there was no wrongdoing whatsoever, no criminal activity. The same is true about Russia or Ukraine. And then there comes January 6th, and then they impeach Donald Trump after he's out of office. Something, too, that was unprecedented. These people are destroying the country. And you can sit here and oh, man, well, Republicans are doing this. And no. No Republicans are going after a president, when they're out of office. Well, what about Bill Clinton? Bill Clinton lied under oath. He actually committed a crime while he was in office. That is not the case with Donald Trump, no matter how much the left lies about it. And I'm not sitting here to try and just defend Donald Trump. The truth of the matter is we have the best country in the United States. And if we let these fools on the left take it down, if they destroy the rule of law, which is what they're doing in the United States of America, what they're doing right now, it's game over for the United States of America. Let me go to this, and then I want to bring you some other headlines. Let me just mention this real quick. McConnell is stepping down as GOP leader. Good. Couldn't happen soon enough. Unfortunately, he's going to torment us through November. And then unless we call, I urge you, seriously, I urge you to call your senator's office and just sound off and let them know that you don't want one of the Johns, John Barrasso, John Thune, John Cornyn, as the GOP leader in the Senate, whether we take back the Senate or not. These guys, in my opinion, are a younger version of Mitch McConnell, and we simply can't have that. Mitch McConnell is just wrong for the times, and so are these guys. They're basically the male Nikki Haley's of the Senate, in my opinion, and we just can't have it. We have to understand what time it is, and by that I mean that the Democrat Party has been co-opted by radicals, by extremists, by communists. And we got to have We've got to have senators and Republicans that are willing to understand that. I heard a talk show yesterday where a gentleman called in and he happened to be Republican, but he was like, the Democrat Party has been taken over by their extremists, and the Republican parties, the extremists in the Republican Party have kind of taken over. And I'm like, extremists in the Republican Party? What are you talking about? Honestly, my concern when it comes to the political atmosphere inside of the United States, I'm far more concerned about Republicans that don't get it. And I don't mean candidate wise. I really don't care if you were for Trump or DeSantis or any of that stuff I mean, talking about policy. I'm talking about ideology. I'm talking about what the left is doing to this country. If you don't get that and that you need people to push back, man, we are so doomed. All right, let me go through this column. And then I got a couple more issues that I want to talk to you about. This was from American Mind. The 2024 election is the title of it. Will be neither fair or will be neither free nor fair. It was written by a man by the name of Jeremy Carl. And basically, he says the normalization of election tampering has perverted American politics. And I want you to pay attention to one word. I was going to say two words. Normalization. Very important word. So conservatives have become so accustomed to election manipulation that it's become normal. Do you feel that way? Do you feel that way? Like I'm expecting it. After 2020, 2022, I was expecting it. 2023, I was expecting it. And I think it's exactly what the left wants. The left wants to be able to sow chaos. They want us to lose hope so that many of us don't show up to vote, that we give up on this nation altogether and so that they can take over. And we can't allow them to do that. But Democrats, he writes, have already far exceeded even their previous serious misdeeds. He quoted a man by the name of Dostoevsky, which he said, man is a creature that can get accustomed to anything. And again, his argument is that we've become accustomed to the manipulation of our election systems thanks to the Democrats. He says conservative complaints about this tend to be dismissed as conspiracy mongering or poor sportsmanship, but to pretend that the Democrats' actions since November 2020 are just part of the rough and tumble of politics is to ignore a mountain of evidence staring us right in the face. There was nothing normal about the 2020 election, and honestly, any fair-minded person understands that. But there will be nothing normal about 2024 as well, and we have to be ready to brace ourselves for that. As a matter of fact, we're already seeing that. Matt Taibbi put in a recent article analyzing the recent moves by Democrats, the Democrat Party, that and I quote, the 2024 presidential race increasingly looks like it will be decided by lawyers, not voters, as Democrats unveil plans for America's first lawfare election. And I'm not even convinced that this will be America's first lawfare election, but he is right that it will be a lawfare election. I felt like 2020 was. Honestly, it's sad to say, but the left beat us to the punch. Once Trump signed the CARES Act, the left pounced on that. They used their attorneys to rig the elections. All right. And basically redo the way that elections were done due to and take advantage of the COVID lockdowns. And that's exactly what the left does or did. And now they're building off of that. They've learned how to exist within this new voting system where it's more mail-in ballots, where it's ballot harvesting and the like. And Republicans just aren't as good at it. We're playing catch up, and that's not good. So we can have the best ideas, but if we don't get out and vote early, if we don't ballot harvest and all that kind of stuff where it's legal, we're in trouble. We're going to have to show up in big numbers. And even then, I don't believe for a second that it's going to be a cakewalk in November. I'm looking at all these polls in swing states, and listen, they do give me hope. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm like, phew, okay, some people are paying attention. But I don't know how many people are paying attention, frankly. I don't know how many people will be motivated to show up in November Or how many people will sit home in November based upon some other polling that says, I don't want either one of these guys. I don't know. And I'm a little concerned. Democratic election interference is already so pervasive that it's hard to imagine free and fair elections going forward. Do you find yourself in that same place? It's crazy where we are. Remember this. This is what the left does. They've already left the GOP body count, as this guy writes. And I love this column by this gentleman. Again, it's an American Mind, and he makes such great points. But think about the GOP body counts. Think of what the left does. They don't play around. We sit here and we talk about winning elections. We sit here and we talk about advancing policies. But when the left says they want to fundamentally transform America, see, I take them seriously. I bash the Republican Party so much, my own party so much, because it's hard to take Republicans seriously. It's hard to take them at their word. Frankly, that's why Donald Trump did so good. I'm not even convinced that Donald Trump was the greatest president since sliced bread. As much as I'm convinced, we were so used to seeing squishy Republicans that once we saw somebody that would come in and keep some of the promises that he ran on, it's like, wow, so refreshing. A guy that's finally doing the job a president is supposed to do and look out for America and put us in a better position. So maybe in that sense, he is great. John Eastman of the Claremont Institute. He was Trump's attorney. You guys might remember. A former law school dean and Supreme Court clerk for Justice Thomas has been forced to pay millions of dollars in legal fees. Again, I'm talking about the GOP body count to defend himself from both criminal and civil charges over the legal advice that he gave former President Donald Trump in 2020. Lawyers are supposed to advocate aggressively for their clients. He did just that. Whether or not you agree with John Eastman's theories at the time, how Trump could challenge the certification of the presidential election, send it back to the states, so the states would have to recertify those votes, or their electoral votes, I believe it was. That was a political theory, and it was used before. It was used before, early on in the United States of America. Another president used it. But Eastman's punishment for representing his clients, well, he faces disbarment in California, criminal charges in Georgia under the corrupt DA Fannie Willis, and I think I believe that situation is going down in flames. Every time I read a headline with Fannie Willis and Nathan Wade, things seem to be getting rougher and rougher for those two. But many other Trump attorneys have already pled guilty to Georgia charges or still face legal jeopardy. Jenna Ellis, one of our colleagues here at Salem, is one of them. The article goes on to say, but of course, Eastman's prosecution and possible disbarment isn't really about Eastman. And we know that, right? It's about sending a message to other talented conservatives. You better not defend Trump, and you better not defend Republicans in general. If you do, you're going to face the end of your careers. You're going to face personal bankruptcy. You're going to and possibly the end of your freedom. A lot of people have said when it comes to President Trump, why doesn't he get the best of the best attorneys? Why doesn't he have better attorneys? And sometimes he does have good attorneys, but sometimes the attorneys are they're okay. This is the reason why. This is the reason why. The left is going to come after you with all they got. They're going to ruin your life. You know how bold and how brave you have to be to represent Donald Trump right now? You have to give his attorneys credit for that. The Democrats are claiming that they want to protect democracy. All the while, what they're doing is destroying it. And by the way, it is a representative republic, but it is a democratic republic. And what I mean by that is everyone gets to participate in our republic representative system, if I said that correctly. But it's Biden. It's the intel community, in my opinion, that is the existential threat to the United States of America. Think of what the left has done to the J6 protesters, many of whom didn't even enter the Capitol or like John Nassif, that I interviewed just a few weeks ago, where he entered the Capitol for 8.5 minutes. He spent 7.5 minutes trying to get out of the Capitol, and he was actually pushed in. He later found out by Capitol Police. He did nothing while he was in there, committed no crimes while he was in there, but he was in there. So he ended up spending 7 months in jail. Compare that to the BLM rioters and the Antifa rioters, CHOP in Seattle, all of these people that literally destroyed property, killed some people. Some of the worst riots that we've seen in America, these Black Lives Matter so-called protests, and they get away with nothing. I mean, they get away with that, and then just a few months later, you have J6 protesters show up, and their lives are ruined, many of them. And then recall this, Matt Taibbi wrote about this in his column, how Democrats were using the term insurrection within hours after the Capitol riot, when few outside of, he writes, of perhaps Democratic political circles were thinking about the term, about what the term meant, whether that was legally or politically. Like, we started hearing them throw around the word insurrection like the word the. Just all of a sudden, in tandem, all together, right? It just seemed coordinated, because that's what the left does. They had a plan that day. Make no mistake about it. And they have a plan leading up to 2024. That's why I believe that things are going to get even worse for Donald Trump. It's nice to see victories along the way, but the left is going to do everything they can to destroy him. And so that's why I'm telling you, you have to be a part of the solution. Not only, guys, I don't want to browbeat you. You know your duty. You know you got to show up to vote. We all know that. But we got to show up in mass, or we don't. I'll just be frank with you. We don't stand a chance. There's got to be more conservatives showing up, more conservatives, enough conservatives and Republicans that show up to defeat the cheat, if you will. That's going to have to happen. This column goes on. Remember the Democrats? They began using that term insurrection within hours of the Capitol riots. Months later, Taibbi documents in a since deleted tweet from Mark Elias, basically the Democrat fixer. He specifically raised the specter of using the 14th Amendment, the Insurrection Act, to disqualify sitting members of Congress from running for re-election, and he explicitly suggested litigation to remove GOP candidates. Well, the left just turned that on Donald Trump, and then so now they're seeking to keep Donald Trump off the ballot in Colorado, in Maine, and we just heard last night that now they're seeking the same thing in Illinois. They're kicking them off the ballot in Illinois. Why are they doing all this? They're doing all of this because this is lawfare. This is how they intend to win. And this is what makes me think, listen, I look at Joe Biden, I say he's so feeble. He's so feeble. There's no way this guy can go on. They got to kick him out. That's been my argument. It's going to be Gavin Newsom. But now I'm torn. I go back and forth with this. As long as they're using lawfare, it leads me to believe that they intend to keep Joe Biden, because why get rid of Joe Biden? They've been using him successfully to fundamentally transform and destroy this country. So why get rid of him? I mean, the guy could be drooling out of his mouth in front of a TV camera, and then you'll see KGP and others talk about how the vigor that Joe Biden has. It won't matter. All he's there to do is to serve the left, to serve the communist left. That's all Joe Biden is there to do. And if he does that, he and his wife will be treated nicely. They'll get this lavish lifestyle that they've been living. They get to live like they make $150 to $200 million a year being the president and first lady of the United States of America. They don't have to worry about going to jail or prison. You have Hunter Biden sitting in courtrooms lying that there's no evidence that his father was involved in his business, when we've already had business partners of theirs come out and say, yeah, he was. I mean, Joe Biden was the brand. We knew we weren't making money if we couldn't sell access to Joe Biden. Devin Archer, Tony Bobulinski, who revealed that Joe Biden was the big man. But the Democratic tactics will grow even more extreme as the election gets closer. Why? Because Biden is weak, and it's so obvious for everyone to see. He's in mental decline. Robert Hur's special counsel Robert Hur's report absolutely destroyed Joe Biden, and many people focus on the damning reports about Biden's mental capacity or his incapabilities. But what was so damning to me was the fact that Robert Hur, first off, didn't prosecute him, which I believe he should have been prosecuted, right? or should have been indicted. I mean, because Robert Hur basically said, listen, this guy's corrupt. He's committed crimes. We've got enough evidence here to take this guy to trial. But since he's so mentally, mentally incapable of standing trial, we're not going to take him to trial. That's what was said. Joe Biden is corrupt, but he's not fit for trial. Yet this guy's fit to lead the nation. This guy is supposedly fit to run for a second term of the United States. He is fit in the sense that he fits the Democrats' narrative. He fits the Democrats' agenda. That's exactly what's going on. That's what we're seeing. We're basically seeing lawfare on display. Think about this. Let me make sure. I want to make sure I got the right place here, because some of this writing, it was just so good. I don't want to pass it up. But again, the tactics for the Democrats will grow even more extreme. The writer writes, the obvious challenges of Biden's mental decline, so vividly evident, is his highly staged and limited public appearances, and then documented in special Robert Hur's decision not to prosecute him, which I talked about. He goes on to say, this was all largely true in 2020 as well. Isn't that true? Like, I looked at Joe Biden in 2020. I know you guys felt the same way. I looked at Joe Biden in 2020 and I was like, what is he doing? This guy should not be running. I thought he was going to lose the primary until James Clyburn came along and endorsed him for South Carolina. And then he took off because blacks voted for him there. But the compliant regime, or the mainstream media, allowed all of this to take place then. They hit the Hunter Biden laptop story. Remember all of this chaos. And they're going to do the same thing. They used COVID to shield him, or the COVID lockdown, so he could run from the basement now, or run his campaign from the basement. Now what they're using is lawfare to shield him. Because every day that we're sitting here talking about former President Trump, we're not talking about the disaster that is Joe Biden. We're not talking about the inflation and high gas prices. We're not talking about how men can be women and women can be men, and how they're destroying the culture and family. We're not talking about all the things and the ways that this guy has absolutely devastated this country. The goal is to lawfare, so that all that we're focused on is Donald Trump, and then you have these commentators on MSNBC, the Joy Reids, the guy that we just listened to, Rachel Maddow. I wish I would have had that clip where she went bat crazy as well over the Supreme Court of the United States. They have to hear that case. It's unprecedented. I mean, this is just asinine. I mean, even if this had been done to Joe Biden, which it wouldn't be done to Joe Biden or Barack Obama, it wouldn't have been done, because we believe in the rule of law, even though the left doesn't, and we practice it even when the left doesn't. I would say this needs to go to the Supreme Court. It's that big of a deal, but the left doesn't see it that way. Now seeking to protect their feeble frontrunner, the establishment has closed ranks even more tightly in 2024, declaring the New Hampshire primary non-binding, canceling its Florida primary entirely. They also entirely, while driving potential threats like Robert Kennedy Jr. out of the Democratic primaries, and then depriving him of Secret Service protection as an independent candidate. Imagine that. A guy whose uncle and father were murdered or were assassinated. No Secret Service protection. And then just consider the lawfare that has been waged, the worst of the worst, the lawfare that has been waged against former President Donald Trump. I want you to think about this. The mainstream media constantly reminds us that he's been indicted on 91 felony counts in 4 criminal cases and charged with a variety of civil misdeeds. And where are all the cases? Think about the locales of all the cases. 73% Democratic voting, Fulton County in Georgia. Luckily, thank God, and still, we don't know what's going to come of it, but it looks like Fani Willis and Nathan Wade are going to be removed from that case, but they should also be prosecuted. These people lied under oath. They need to pay the piper. 86% Democratic Manhattan, all right, where a liberal judge has now ordered, Judge Engoron, Trump to pay $450 million, and he ordered them to pay it in like 30 days. In a case where there were fraud, a case with fraud where there was no victims. And the alleged victims wanted to do more business with Donald Trump. Come on, man. Come on. These lenders were paid back with profit. The Wall Street Journal called it correctly. The writer says it was unprecedented, so much so that even New York Governor Kathy Hochul, the nanny of New York, went on the record to reassure normal borrowers that they didn't have to worry. This was only a Trump thing. They were only targeting Trump. Why would you want to live in a state like that? And why would you trust them when they're telling you they're willing to illegally go after a guy just for the sake of destroying him politically? I hope New York crashes and burns. I'm sorry if you live there. The writer writes, this has followed an equally unprecedented 82 million civil judgment against Trump in New York for defamation and another flimsy case from a highly questionable actor. Beyond that, Trump has been indicted by the feds for storing classified material at Mar-a-Lago, the same of which Joe Biden or Robert Hur declined to prosecute Joe Biden. When Trump is arguing presidential immunity, and Joe Biden can't argue that because he was a senator and a vice president, and he shouldn't have had classified documents chilling in his garage near his Corvette. Trump's legal fees have added up to $50 million. This is as much as he spent on TV campaign ads. So every time, and they know it, the left knows it because it's Lawfare, baby. The left knows it. When people donate, his money has to go to pay for attorneys instead of a ground game to defeat the left. You see, this is so crazy. It's hard for me to talk about and not get discouraged. But you're the hope. You're the hope. We're the hope. We have no choice but to fight back. This is not going to be easy. Anyone that tells you this is going to be, oh, Trump's going to run away with it, they're blowing smoke up your behind. A primary race is not the same as a general election race, guys. It just isn't. People were emotionally attached to former President Donald Trump. They wanted him to have that term that he didn't get to have, that they feel like he was robbed. They felt like the left robbed him. All right, so that's understandable. When it comes to a general election, Democrats and independents don't give a flip about that, and they're not going to. We have to remember that. The writer writes, the costs are far worse than the financial toll, the $50 million. Rather than spending his efforts on the campaign trail against Biden, the anti-Trump lawfare has ensured that he is tied up in courtrooms. Donald Trump said, and I quote, if I weren't running, none of this stuff would have ever happened. None of these lawsuits would have ever happened. I would have had a nice life, quote unquote. And he's absolutely right. It's not a coincidence that all of these cases, all of these charges popped up and surfaced after Trump announced that he was running for president again. If we lived in a serious country, if we lived in a pre-Obama country, because I do believe the United States was a better place, even with rhinos before Obama, the institutions would go to extra mile to ensure that these trials didn't interfere with the elections. But they don't care. They don't care because it's all about getting Trump. And I think part of it is just because so many people stand to be exposed. He talks about the danger ahead. Look at what they've done to Elon Musk. Elon Musk, a liberal. You've got people like Bill Maher. You've got people like Joe Rogan, all liberals. And Joe Rogan, I mean, far left. I'm not saying he was a leftist. It's weird. Joe Rogan is just a different type of beast. But he was far left. He was a Bernie Sanders guy. He's even talking about voting for Trump. But think of the people that they're trying to harm. Remember when Joe Rogan came out and said he was doing, he took all of these prescriptions, took all this advice for COVID. The left went insane because here Joe Rogan was on the left and he wasn't following the narrative. And they hated him for it. Now think of even Elon Musk. This guy talks about the danger ahead. It's not just Trump. It's not just the J6 defendants. Even ancillary enemies of the regime are targeted. Remember, a Delaware court revoked $56 billion, a $56 billion pay package given to Elon Musk, his reward for creating enormous shareholder value that far exceeded even his hefty sum. But he was penalized. He was penalized. The decision was an unprecedented action in Delaware's corporate history. The writer writes, according to the Wall Street Journal, and it was designed to send a clear signal to those opposing the regime as the numerous federal prosecutions and investigations of Musk's own business. It was a lesson not lost on other businessmen, such as leading tech entrepreneur and venture capitalist Joe Lonsdale, who have not bent the knee to the regime. He was quoted as saying on X, "They're teaching him a lesson. They want him to back down and hope to silence other business leaders, including me." That's exactly what's happening. The writer says, combine the Democrats' massive election interference with a presidential campaign who is not shy about calling it out, and you have a potentially combustible situation. He says Trump is fun to bluster, but his strongest supporters were often frustrated by how much Trump colored within the lines dictated by his enemies in his first administration. Given his treatment by the regime, it is hard to see why he would be so constrained in the second term. And I hope he's not just saying it, but guys, there has to be